And my idea would be that the leader would present the points that the group wants to bring out to everyone. But if anybody wants to supplement, please feel free. So. No, from there itself, you have a mic there. You can just stand up and be loud so that everybody can hear you.
As Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, right? So he had to leave, so I've took on the role of clerk-in-chief of the group, right? And the rapporteur. So there are certain things that we felt were important. First, the notion of, why is it that we need these think tanks at all? Because if you people look at the innovation literature, there's this growing emphasis on what's called the triple helix model of knowledge production, where it's not just universities that are a monopoly. Universities, industry, and civil society are increasingly engaged in the production of knowledge. Knowledge also is no longer so codified and explicit that you find it only in classrooms. You have a lot of tacit knowledge that comes about. So you need to go out there and sort of dirty your hands really in the real world if you want to understand how problems are structured. They don't come as anthropological problems or economic problems. They're problems, period, right? So that's another, so these are sort of how we sort of rationalize the need for these things and how we felt that thinking about it in this form would help. Then the other thing was the need to sort of integrate. None of this, we can talk about this, but we're not going to be very effective unless we're able to think about how universities themselves are going to reorganize themselves. Because our universities are fairly ossified. Let's not even kid ourselves about that. So we need to think about how we can change these structures in some way to make some beginnings to sort of reach out to the outside world. And people also, one of my colleagues drew an analogy between university think tanks or think tanks at universities and incubators, right? So generating new ideas. So a couple of other points, I guess I said it in a slightly different form earlier, our disciplinary boundaries are breaking down. A lot of the disciplines that we have today are actually remnants of the 19th century European university. And I think we need to sort of get past those and realize again that the world is a hell of a lot messier than the comfortable confines of our university departments, which are really, in some senses, really the remnants of turf battles, right? And this knowledge production has to be done in terms of partnerships. And one very, very important point that another colleague raised was that we're also living in a world that is changing, where we no longer have clear-cut rules, where India could take a stance saying we're post-colonial, we believe in third world solidarity, right? Notions of post-colonial, notions of the third world are all breaking down. So how is it that we are able to give our policymakers a set of tools to think about, action, right, or practice, if you prefer that word, in a changing post-colonial, post-third world situation. And there's, of course, the need for a revolving door between academia, think tanks, the state. And here again, I think academics must also be incentivized. They should not be punished for going out and spending a year in a think tank or whatever. Your job should be protected, your tenure, whatever it is that it's involved needs to be assured so that you're actually going to go out there and do your best. And finally, the EU model of where you have this Erasmus degree program where you can actually go across many countries and earn your degree, do an internship across 3 or 4 countries, is possibly a model that we can consider for South-South cooperation. So you don't have to earn your degree from just one country, right? And at this point in time, at least in India, it's hard to do it across states, never mind across countries, right? So we got a lot of work to do. And again, an extension of that would be to use a MOOC as a basis for cooperation across countries. And I think I will stop here.
Thank you. This was Dr. Balaji Patsati. He teaches in Bangalore at IIIT. Anybody from the group would like to supplement any point that you think? Okay. So WPS, you want to? He wants to amend. Okay.
We do not have one single reliable number on how much software we either produce or export. So if that is the case of the leading, one of the leading export industries, you know how hard it's possibly going to be for other sectors of the economy. So I think the need to put together frameworks to which we can collect data, whether it's for domestic analysis or comparative analysis, becomes extremely critical. And I think that's where think tanks can also play a very, very crucial role.
Nobody from the group? Very good. So I go to group 2. Shriram?
Thank you, Sachin. So the challenges and the opportunities. The challenges, we have identified a few. I think one of the points of our group is that you need some kind of a coordinator for the think tank university connections to move forward. It's not a automatic or by default. And by coordinator, it doesn't necessarily mean somebody who's a champion in each of these institutions who's pushing for that is of course needed, but more than that, the group believes that the government or the state has a role to play in connecting think tanks, and one of the views was that the government should provide broad guidelines on collaboration, especially to younger universities to make the right kinds of choices and connect with think tanks. There was also a point about the territorial bias of think tanks. As has already been mentioned, most of them are concentrated in metros, and I think that's the case universally, not just in our country. And especially in most developing countries, it's the big capitals and the large commercial centers. So the think tanks need to step out of their comfort zones to be able to reach universities, and that we must advocate for it, and we hope some think tanks do it and reach out to university partners outside their cushy metropolitan centers. Then the last, there was also a point about government providing guidelines, because otherwise we could make wrong choices that benefit neither the universities nor the think tanks. So right now there isn't any such broad set of framework or guidelines. And then on the other side, the challenge is that too many permissions required in public universities to conduct applied research. One of the points that was raised, sir, ICCR, you're still here, one of the points was that public institutions require, cannot devote faculty exclusively for research or for applied work for as long as they want, because they are required for teaching. And I was mentioning how some private universities have freedom where we designate some scholars as research exclusive. So they don't have to do any teaching for 1 year or 2 years, and then they can collaborate a lot more with think tanks and produce a lot more output based on targets. So some of the over-regulated spheres of our public universities is a problem. Last, there are some suggestions from the group. One is that PhD students should be a central link between think tanks and universities, and because they have more time on their hands than think tanks, which are supposed to rapidly respond to current events, and on a daily basis they're writing commentaries and such stuff. But then the PhD students in universities, they can be outsourced some of the think tank work, and it's the onus again, it seems to be on think tanks to identify partners or and to solicit PhD students from universities to do some work for them. Data has to be shared with these students. There's always a lot of suspicion, and data is already scarce in our country, and especially in developing countries. And for it to be shared in an outsourcing form to PhD students is something that must be encouraged, even though there are a lot of objections. Then, of course, there is the general snobbishness or the mindset problem. It's a dual thing, but especially in the universities, there is a view that we are doing the pure research and we are somehow cut above these policy wonks, and that they somehow that this is an ephemeral thing, what these people do, and we are doing something that's advancing knowledge in our field, and that kind of chip on the shoulder problem. So many academics are either unwilling or incapable to bridge this gap. And there is a mindset issue that will require university leadership within universities, vice chancellors, as well as regulatory bodies to encourage more and more. Through UGC, we get a lot of circulars and advisory notes and all these things in the universities. Maybe one of the things could be to say that, have a target and encourage more of your professors to be involved in think tank work. Last thing is an idea for joint fundraising by think tanks and universities through consortia. Usually you find co-authored works where professors of a university or multiple universities come together and apply for funding. Or sometimes you have think tanks applying on their own for funding through their networks, but rarely you have joint consortia comprising scholars and policy wonks together in the same group. So maybe that's something again, but the sum of all this is without a kind of a coordinating role by the state, it looks like organically or simply through champions within universities and within think tanks, it will not happen. And I think RIS has taken on that mantle in a way of being a coordinator, and hats off to you.
Thank you, Shriram. Anybody else from the group would like to supplement, Professor Bishamba?
Only one issue.
Yeah.
I mean, collaboration between academic institutions and think tanks are a must. These are necessary conditions. But the point is, we have been producing hundreds of, technical reports every year. But the government, unless these two institutions make a point to invite policy makers, into their dissemination activities, on a regular basis, sort of. Influencing major policy decisions through their findings would be extremely difficult. So it's not that the countries in the south lack quality research, This will also, of course, will be important in the sense like this will provoke, this will facilitate policy debates, policy dialogues, but influencing major policy decisions with your findings needs some sort of mechanism that will engage policymakers at frequent intervals. So
That's precisely the idea, Professor Bishamba, because think tanks are in touch with the ground sort of exposure, and universities bring in the theoretical framework. So that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
I am Anurag from Pandit Dindayal Petroleum University, Gandhinagar. Think tank can be a connecting dot as far as internationalization of universities are concerned. Because apart from the regulatory framework and all those things, many students, once they complete their graduate, they would like to go to higher studies to US and Canada and all. We see a lot of things in Gujarat. Around 40% of our students go to higher studies, that too in US and Canada. May not be all in Ivy League universities also. Honestly, I am submitting this. So the point is that they are least aware, and as a faculty also we have to do a lot of R&D. But if any structured approach is there through South-South cooperation, the good institutions which are located in these countries, they can also be figured out, and then we can promote our students where quality education, affordable education, and then a lot of developmental and then post-education, the job opportunities are also there. Think tank can play a very major role in this regard.
Thank you. Thank you. Table number 3.
This is Jyoti here. And on behalf of our groups, there was a point that came up about heterogeneity of the university. So you have the private, you have the public, you have the regional heterogeneity, and therefore you have some universities and some schools which do have IR as a discipline and some which don't. So that is one. Whereas there are some people, there are mixed responses that come up, and those mixed responses reveal that there could be some think tanks and universities which are already well connected, and there are also the other side of the spectrum that is there, where in some regions they are just not connected. The connection can go in a number of ways. The connection could go in terms of collaborative teaching. It could go in collaborative resources. Sometimes think tanks, if they are in a particular city and a university has a better infrastructure, then that could be supporting each other. So it is with respect to resources, with respect to research, with respect to projects, that kind of collaboration can come in. Further, it was also pointed out that in terms of pedagogy, in terms of learning, of course, data website has already been talked about. You talked about website, and data has come in on the two tables. So that enables you to have more fine-tuned research. So that is there, but it's a mixed bag of information that while some universities don't have IR on their courses, that needs to come in, that looks like an opportunity, as Elizabeth put it. But again, as per my friend here, Arun Kumar Thakur, he felt that Nepal, for example, was bypassed in terms of that the Chinese think tanks are more prominently present over there with that kind of a thing. So I'm just giving an anecdotal kind of evidence out here to say that sometimes there are these areas which are not looked into and need to be looked. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Can I now jump to table 6? Okay. So the table could not arrive on consensus?
No, I think it's just that she ran short of time. Yeah. I just wanted to say that, this think tank University Connect we launched 5 years ago in C3S. There are 200 people who are connected virtually in our membership, and 55 interns have passed through that. And out of them, they have written 15 to 18 books. And just today, I went to the Ministry of External Affairs and handed over 8 books which are written by the interns. These are all peer-reviewed, guided properly, subjects were chosen. Of course, it's all specific to China. It included issues of social credit system, gender equality, rural-urban divide. So, we're already doing that. I'm saying maybe I'm geographically blessed because I'm in Chennai, which is a metro, and I got connected to 6 universities. All of them are autonomous. Madras University, the Madras Christian College, the Christ College in Bangalore, the Madras MGU in Kerala. We take programs there. We don't bring them there. We go there and engage them with our programs. So all the conferences, seminars, roundtables are conducted there. It's already done. So why I wanted to bring this out personally is that the format is working, a template is there. It's not that it's the best template, but it's available for us to take it forward and engage that.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you, Commodore Vasan. Professor Thakur.
Just the China factor. No, China factor is one, another one. But what is the motive of that very think tank? Just I want to say something. Our motive is to what extent we are going to contribute. We are contributing to the students. The students, we are producing the students. We just provide the resources and information inputs to the student. Methodology are just most of the just our fellow has been talked about the Western. How they do the research, what is their pedagogy, that is important. They are not the only theory based. Knowledge based is, practical based is, that are being not followed by us. Few universities are following this is the one aspect. But once we talk about the think tank, then our responsibility is to what extent we are going to contribute to make the plan and policy of the government. Who will make the plan? As a student of management, I know that the plans are being made by the top level executives. Who are the top level executives? Means we think tanks will provide the input to the planning. So that very plan can be based on the information, best information, and that information will play the role to make a good plan. So that, but we are associated with what type of, means the political people are making the plan. Oh yes, just I want to link this.
No. We have to go round the table. People have their flights.
Just
so
only I want to say that university will help you. If you have the connection with all the universities, and it is the just age of specialization, once the economics has several dimensions, management and several dimensions, then once you talk about any part, then you have to just coordinate that very university and which part of information is required, they are to be authorized, and then we talk about then it will be fruitful. That just I want to say.
Thank you, Professor Thakur. Can we go to table 6 now? Because Renu has to leave for her flight. So thanks, Renu. Yeah.
Jumping the queue. So I will not repeat the subjects which have already been spoken about. And Professor was very keen that I speak about joint publications and rewards to students, which I am saying, sir, because that was his idea. And we discussed about curriculum and creating a database of the South. Our first thing we said was that there should be a mutually agreed upon areas of research which the think tank should list out and the universities could work on so that they have policy implications. We agreed upon creating case studies which are of global nature, the internationalization of our own agendas, comparative studies between countries, longitudinal studies across time spans, and we share progressive legislations across countries to create a southern database. And areas, of course, in addition to what you have already listed in the program, Sachin, IR, public policy, we added that we should have low-cost innovation techniques, like the Jugaad techniques we have, traditional medicine like Ayush, Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, indigenous technologies in climate change, climate resilient methods which are cheap and locally available, which can be replicated. For example, the Baira floating cultivation from Bangladesh. And for challenges, we were wondering where would all the funding come from, who would organize, who would be the nodal agency, and will we be given a space for critical thinking? Can we say something which is not really, the agenda should not be set by the funding agency?
Thank you. Thanks, Renu. Yes, Professor Chandrachud, you want to supplement?
Just quickly, she's already summarized it. But see, I mean, the impression that I get, I think I'm the only one or maybe one or two from public universities. I teach at Hindu College. And in the last 2 years, Hindu College has entered into a partnership with one of the leading think tanks. And we already host the policy conclave. The Raisina dialogue is held here, but a similar policy conclave is held in the university. I mean, she's already pointed out a lot because we just discussed it. But I think it would be very important to also think of a point-based workload system at the universities now. Very recently, a colleague of mine rang me from the UK, and we applied for a joint research grant. And she said, how much should I budget for you? I said, for what? And she said that, look, you'll be conducting the field work, so maybe the time loss for your teaching should be compensated by this research. Now, this is where I think, technicalities lie. If the think tanks have to work with the universities, and if the universities have to work with the think tanks, it's not easy to say that the teacher should be getting all leave. But yes, there should be some kind of adequate flexibility where the teachers and the researchers. Similarly, within the existing windows, for example, the internal assessments that we have, I think especially the social science students could be encouraged to work with the think tanks, and instead of writing questions and answers for for assignments and projects, that could be marked. And the third and most important is, when the universities do provide platform to the think tanks, there should be some focus on an open system in which all sorts of think tanks, because we do understand that think tanks also have the ideological tints. So all sorts of, and especially the rational ones at least, that should be shortlisted, because who constitutes a think tank is a larger question. So there could be many think tanks, but all cannot be allowed. So some defined norms on which think tanks could be shortlisted, and some defined norms on which some universities could be on a pilot scale shortlisted should set the ball rolling. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I go to table 4, where we have Dr. Arvind Kumar, please. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Is there one more hand there? Yes. Yeah, please. Sorry, Dr. Arvind Kumar. Just 1 minute.
Hi. Just beyond what we have already discussed, just a simple example for people who might be interested. I come from the Indian School of Business, and we have a pretty interesting model. We are a completely research-driven institution, and at Indian School of Business, we have developed these research institutions, and I come from the Bharati Institute of Public Policy, which is a think tank within an education system itself. So we have a complete research team that's working with the Government of India, the state governments, the donor agencies, the multilateral organizations, and we get the inputs from the faculty, the best faculty that are there in the institution. So, it's a very good tie-up where we are able to produce knowledge and actually bring in an impact by actually disseminating it, not just to the people at large, but also sharing it with the governments in terms of, if there is technical research that is going on, we come up with simple policy briefs on those high-level researches, which is very, very impactful. So in the States, we have had great impacts, and the governments have been following a lot of our research. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind Kumar. Oh, Dr. Let me then take a second round, because I have to first finish the tables. Okay, please.
I brought prepared stuff and few points she included in this much. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much. We discussed it in detail. And if we have understood it correctly, through this Connect, I think the priority is to help build, develop young group of strategic analysts. If that is the priority, obviously both think tank and the university system, they are both complementary to each other. Because knowledge creation happens mostly in the university education and the same group of people join the think tank. And that complementarity between the think tank and the university obviously will add value to the building of the critical mass of young strategic analysts. So that part we obviously understood very well. The challenges which basically we discussed, I think obviously have to be understood. And the challenges were largely in the context of the policy writing. That policy writing basically at the university level obviously is not preferred. So technically, in fact, many of us keep doing the academic writing. So once they really get to work with the think tank, they learn the art of policy writing there. And many of us as a faculty, when we do the policy writing, obviously these are not mostly available in the strategic areas. As you know that if you do some policy paper for certain aspect of strategic issues, it will not be made available in the public domain. So what happens is that most of the challenges comes for the faculty in the university system. And the think tank persons basically, they obviously have this liberty of doing the academic research and policy research both. There are no points for the policy research in the university system. And that again, I think Dr. Parvarta is not here. I think UGC rules basically do not allow the university system to take up the role for the policy paper writing. And that aspect of the detail has to be understood largely in the context of India's education system.
He has already interested Professor Malhotra to carry forward the suggestions, so don't bother.
And the prospects basically again are far too many. But at the same time, as you know, let me tell you, the number of think tanks working on a strategic areas are very limited in India. I think Professor Mahapatra said 500. 500, he might have considered everything under the umbrella of the research in India. It is not more than 25, 26 think tanks working on strategic issues. And many of the think tanks are located in Delhi. There are some in Bangalore, there are some in Chennai, which really are coming up. There are some in Mumbai. Very limited think tanks which are really working in this area. So how in fact think tanks would be able to absorb these many students to get trained and see that how they get, they become a better strategic analyst. So that again is seen to be a part of challenge. The course material, I think course material by and large is getting aligned with the requirement. As you know that most of these debates in international relations are all Western and American driven. But now there is a change, and this change is for the betterment of the understanding of the complexities. Now we are trying to evolve a curriculum which can help these younger minds to understand the complexities of the world system from India's perspective. And that is what is happening now in various courses which are coming up across the country. And obviously the complementarity of the knowledge creation and knowledge sharing, these two again are remain very important part of the priority, both for the think tank and the university system. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Arvind Kumar. Can I now turn to Professor Sudarshan on table 5?
I've delegated this to my former colleague, Dr. Asim Prakash.
Yes, very good. Dr. Asim Prakash. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think since we are the last, we have the least to say because most of the points are covered. I'll quickly brief up what this group thought about. So the first is a point which partly was covered on this table, but I just want to articulate differently. Why is there a distinction between a think tank and a university? Because most of the universities, as far as the university which I worked for, or early I worked with Sudarshan Jindal, for that matter, other universities already have centers, specialized centers for research located within the universities. So, and that is perhaps one of the reasons that if one has this kind of a model which is adopted widely, that gives a leeway for linkages with the government and other civil society actors. So that can be perhaps an institutional linkages which one is talking about. Second point which comes up because of policy research requires certain kind of interdisciplinarity. So the most critical point here is how do we promote a mobility between the departments, forget university. Right now we don't even have the mobility within the departments because we are so tied up to the discipline within the university system. Third point which was rather very interesting in one sense of the term because it was advocated that the geographical proximity like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, why don't they can work on Maldives and Sri Lanka? So that kind of a research should be, because they are 45 minutes away from Chennai to Sri Lanka. So why can't they work with those, that's geographical proximity. it was suggested to incentivize this young minds right from the school, like class 11th and 12th, through scholarship and as well along with scholarship to usher into the discipline of social science and to get attracted towards the discipline of social science, and also to integrate bit of international relations, particularly South-South cooperation in the NCERT and other school textbooks. Last point which I want to take is about the linkages between one of the, I kept it for the last because I wanted to propose this to Professor Bhushan Patwardhan, also as well for Professor V.K. Malhotra, it is about offering a degree by expanding the curriculum through a linkages between the think tank and the universities. So where it's an Erasmus Mundus model where you go to 3-4 universities. So here we would develop a curriculum which is based on the policy demands where students are located into 3-4 institutions over the period of 2 years based on research in specialization. It can be regulation, it can be urbanization, it can be social conflict, depending on what you want to do on research. So the degree can be allocated, the joint degree mechanism should be actively promoted with the help of UGC and some kind of an help from the ICSR. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Asim. Now, from ISEC Bangalore, the director.
Just I wanted to just emphasize a point. We have the National Science Talent Examination, National Science Talent. Similarly, we should have National Social Science Talent Search Examination so that you can create a critical mass. And I think Professor Malhotra can take it up with the Government of India. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think, so now what I would do is I would open the floor for, apart from the coordinators of the group, if anybody else, Professor
thank you, Sachin. The 2 points that I'd like to make that we did not get a chance to discuss in this group, but that reflect points that were echoed a little bit in the other groups, and that is, one relates to intellectual integrity and academic freedom, and the second one relates to information sharing. Both go two ways. On the first point, I think there's an important concern that should be addressed of conflict of interest in relating to think tanks that have an agenda. So that needs to be revealed, and in some cases, a line needs to be drawn, and I'll cite the easiest example, which is Philip Morris International. Those that accept money from Philip Morris International, even with disclosure, should be rejected by the community, and the public health community has done so. The other side of it is, of course, academic freedom. The academics should be free to engage in collaborations with think tanks, even if most of their colleagues detest the perceived ideology behind it. That's part of academic freedom. And the second point I wanted to make, which goes two ways, is that of information sharing. One of the things that I've learned from you is that in this setting, in this country, there is often a lack of awareness of what the opportunities might be. And this could be addressed at two obvious levels, and several people have alluded to this. Obviously, at the university level, there should be a coordination mechanism where somebody is knowledgeable about what are the opportunities, both for students, and students at one level would intern and learn how think tanks operate. At a higher level, would use the think tank for part of their master's or doctoral dissertations. And among the faculty, who is sharing that information? Secondly, for international cooperation, where is the source of that information? Is the Office of South-South Cooperation providing something on their website about collaborations? Could somebody accept to provide that information so that universities or scholars who want to find a think tank in another country, a close neighboring country or a faraway country, would know who is willing to collaborate with a university? So those two sources of information, along with the academic integrity issues, struck me as something that was echoed in many statements that were made. Thank you for allowing me to.
Thank you, Stephen. I already have 5 names before me. Dr. Sandhya Iyer, after that Professor Hari Babu, Dr. Abraham George, and I would request from Afghanistan we have Dr. Nazir Kabiri here. So, Sandhya.
Yeah, thanks so much, Professor Sachin. I just wanted to add to what has been already discussed, but what came to my mind as I was hearing is that the concerns of challenges needs to be deepened a little more. Not about whether Indian universities can collaborate with Indian think tanks. I've seen it within the larger South-South cooperation as well. The main challenge would be to identify mechanism. How do we align ourselves with, say, an international think tank? For instance, from TIS, we have been working a lot in Afghanistan and Myanmar. We are going everywhere. We also have MOUs with multiple universities, but how do we know what sorts of think tanks are located within the global south, where we could perhaps start aligning and also do the same amount of exercises which have been discussed? That's point number one. The point number two, which I wanted to talk about, is there's a lot of debate on sustainable education framework. How do you create universities more amenable to sustainable or Agenda 2030? What are we supposed to look out for? I find the fundamental challenges with regard to financing. How do we really look at substantiating our resources for this education architecture that we are talking about? What should be the role of FIDC? What should be the role of South-South cooperation or UGC? For India, it's UGC. What about the other countries? Therefore, that takes me to the point which Professor Hari Babu was mentioning, the institutional framework to take it through needs a little fine-tuning and thinking perhaps. And thus, this takes me to the last bit. One is a problem of aggregation of Agenda 2030 kind of research, which we need to kind of look at, and also localizing, because that's a huge amount of work which we are also doing in India at this stage. People don't know how to really understand the localization, and there are a number of experiments which can be pointed, and that's what Renu Modi also mentioned.
Yeah.
Development of caselets, and then defining a case study framework. Do we have monies for that? Because only some of the premier universities in America talk about funding case study writing. Do we really have resources for the same? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhya Iyer. She's from Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. So, Professor Hari Babu, from Hyderabad University, he was Pro-Vice Chancellor there.
Yes, I'd just like to mention that universities have to reform themselves. Today, it is impossible to transfer credits from one university to another. From Delhi University, you cannot transfer credit to JNU, right? So students, Delhi University students cannot go and do a course in JNU, right? So I think at that level, we should really look at the university reform. Then if think tanks are located in one particular university, let's say Delhi University, JNU students should be allowed to do courses there, right? So this fundamental reform has to be done, and also the scope of universities should be enlarged. They should not be confined to one particular state, and they should, the scope should be all India scope, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hari Babu. Now I turn to Professor Milindo Chakravarti. Has he gone out or? Okay, so then I request Dr. Abraham George for his remarks here on table 2.
I just want to say something about funding. Universities of the South, generally, they are facing problems of funding, of inadequate funding. Think tanks also in the South, they are also short of funds. So the money has to come from somewhere. It could be from the government or mainly from business houses, private business houses. So what will be the real motive behind this kind of funding? And if research projects are with some motive and it is donor driven, it is going to be a real problem. And so, especially if curriculum is going to be in some way or other changed or adjusted with this kind of donors, and with regard to social sciences and humanities, I think we have to tread very, very carefully in this kind of university think tank collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now I would request Dr. Nazir Kabiri for his remarks. He's from Afghanistan, and he has just established a new think tank with the Biruni Institute. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sachin, for the floor. As a former policymaker with the government of Afghanistan, I could desperately see the need for more of the think tanks, more of the universities connecting with industry, with the institutions that run public policy. One of the first common agenda for both the think tanks and the universities are our calls for the common appeal for policy influence. University is much limited on that front, but think tanks more liberty when it comes to the media and visibility in issues involving advocacy, and at the same time turning issues into a national debate. Think tanks could perhaps, and universities jointly work on that front for policy change and policy influence. The second is, I'm not fond of the idea of the government connecting think tanks with the universities. They both are civil society institutions. A lot of commonalities, if anything, a lot of commonalities between the two institutions for collaborating in a civil society space, rather than the government as an integrator or connector.
Thank you, Chandrachud Singh. And then I can also see Dushni here. I would very much request her. She is heading a very important think tank in Sri Lanka, Institute for Policy Studies. So,
thank you. I mean, the issues that have come up, I'm sure eminent people here will take note of it, and in a due course, some of that may be addressed. But may I suggest a simple point from we can immediately start up? And that is, my own experiences have been that while content is a very important matter of research, style is equally important. And what I find both at the universities as well as the research, think tanks, that if we do hold workshops for each other to start with, that's the humble beginning, where each can feed into each other, the kinds of research, the kind of research styles or maybe methodologies that we can start up from, I think that will be an immediate takeaway. And then, over a period of time, a lot of other structural rigidities which do exist can be slowly and steadily, sorted out. But that would also require that we do shortlist or do have some kind of a framework within which some think tanks and some universities can be brought together, because qualitatively that would also be very important.
Thank you. Dushni, can I come to you now? And then to Bush Montes. Dr. Hassan, I had to stop you, but now we are opening. So, Dushni first.
Thank you, Sachin. I'm going to be very brief because I just walked in and I'm not very sure what the
Everybody can see you now.
Discussion was. Just on the Sri Lankan experience of trying to connect think tanks to universities, coming from a think tank background, our problem is that unless you have a very strong ecosystem of research, then think tanks also suffer from not being able to draw in talent, not just as peer colleagues, but also recruiting young researchers into think tanks. And I think the benefits flow both ways. Universities tend to be very much academic and, focused, but miss out on some of the policy connotations of that research. And when they do work with researchers who have been engaged in public policy, then there is much to be gained from think tanks, benefit from the rigor that universities bring, and the universities benefit from the policy sort of insights that we bring. So I think any efforts to try and bring these two arms of research together, very welcome, and I envy India really, because you have so many think tanks and so many universities, but countries in, say, in Sri Lanka, for instance, we are much less, we don't have that much resources and capacity. So congratulations to the initiative by our RIS.
Thank you, Dushni. We can always partner and share the institutions, as was proposed from table 5, of why not those who are closer, physical proximity may become an area of connect, or reason to connect. So, Butch Montes, you wanted to say something? No, nothing? Okay, so then I go to Dr. Hassan. Was there somebody else on table 4? Yes, madam, please. Yeah, Dr. Kaur.
Thank you, sir. So, thanks to the So I will just like to add one thing. Most of the things have already been said. Like this is Think Tank University Connect. And I think for the connection, the first very thing required is the communication. And that comes from the language. So what I think is sometimes everyone knows, Think Tank knows what they want to get, university also knows, but the barrier is the communication or the language barrier. So I think we need to develop certain language promotion, language learning courses through the universities, which can, they can disseminate the knowledge and all can become knowledgeable about the various languages so they can interact better.
Yeah.
So that aspect needs to be looked
Thank you. Dr. Hassan, you want, I had to stop you when you were on your table, but please tell me something, what you wanted to say.
The ways to ensure
You can take the mic, please. Yeah.
the ways to ensure dissemination and absorption, I think it was not covered, of knowledge created by think tanks and universities happen on a real-time basis. The think tanks should be given higher status and good support system. So they will be pleased and they will they will do more contribution. The university should select the most outstanding and committed students for think tanks. Projects and assignments of current issues should be designed by the think tanks and linked with the curriculum. Seminars and workshops should be under the supervision of think tanks. Research papers must be published under the guidance and association of think tanks. Think tanks create more and better knowledge, and universities are seriously interested in creating and sharing new knowledge. The few think tanks, if not many, should come on a common platform. There is a need to create universities-based policy framing groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, Professor Mohanty. Let me...
One statement.
Huh.
One statement. See, we must recognize that universities are also think tanks.
Yeah. They are expected to...
Think tanks, if they have a higher status, that is absurd.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will antagonize universities.
Yeah. Gulshan, please, yeah.
Thank you, Sachin. First, let me first congratulate RIS to initiate this discussion. I have worked in think tanks and I have also worked in the universities. So I was trying to understand what actually we are talking about, and I'm really thankful for the point you made. What I sincerely believe, we were told that we have by the representative from the UGC that we have about 900 universities here. So obviously, at the same time, we were also told that the numbers of think tanks are relatively limited, for whatever reasons are. So obviously, if we are thinking that think tanks, whatever the think tanks are doing something different, and universities are doing something different, so that connect has to be made. What I believe, and I come from School of International Studies, and I believe that we are the oldest think tank on foreign policy, international relations in India. But yes, what I'm trying to understand from the conversation here is that the kind of policy relevant work which think tanks are supposed to do, universities are not doing. So to fill this gap, perhaps, Professor Malhotra is here, what perhaps we need to do is within the universities, actually there are plenty of possibilities of having those kind of research work or policy relevant work which think tanks are supposed to do. Because who are writing all those policy papers even in think tanks? These are the students, those who have come from our university. Since yesterday they were with us, tomorrow they are with RIS, and they are writing the same thing. So it means they can also do the same thing within the university. So if we also encourage this culture of think tanks within the universities with all kind of policy framework, most of our problems could be resolved. Yes, of course, there are certain kind of think tanks do a very specific kind of work, which, of course, more linkages. At the moment, those linkages are there, but more, I think, individual-based linkages. What we really need is more institutional linkages to encourage further. But, this conversation, I really like it, but to some extent, universities should not be underestimated in any way, that they are not think tank, they are not producing any policy relevant work.
Thank you, Gulshan. I think this was very helpful intervention because our basic idea of holding this conversation was largely, as you may recall, the work that we did 3 years back on South-South cooperation. When you invited, we got that published with the journal that you edit and is brought out by your department. So idea is that the think tanks, the work that they are doing, probably those who are teaching at the universities are fairly placed in terms of theorizing that process. And what is happening is that we end up with Anglo-Saxon theorization of development processes, not only of themselves, but also of ours. And as a result, the policy space that we were discussing in the Delhi 5 for last 2 days is not getting adequately addressed. And as a result, the academics from the South are not getting what Professor Malhotra in the beginning said requires to be celebrated. And as a result, we are not only sort of short of impact that is required, but also the policy inputs that are needed. So this gap is not in terms of creating a grand alliance of 500 universities and 4,000 think tanks that we have. That's not the idea. Idea is just to start with few. It may be Symbiosis, it may be Jindal, it may be Sikkim University, it may be JNU, anybody. And 2 or 3 think tanks. If somebody from Sri Lanka, if somebody from Afghanistan, from Nepal, they come in, fine. Maybe 10 people. We don't have to create a grand thing to begin with. But the idea really is to bridge this gap. What is happening is, and you know for sure, how many of our universities are really teaching about South-South cooperation. And I was so much impressed when I was invited in Argentina to interact with university professors of their take on Raul Prabisc and the Latin American approach on development cooperation. What has happened is because of the Anglo-Saxon approach and their dominance on our development debates and development teaching, universities are completely out in terms of what kind of theorization Raul Prabisc has done or Sukhmoy Chakravarti has done on localization of development. Because we don't teach. It may be just one section in development economics. That's not the idea. The idea is much larger of our international engagement. As a result, we hardly talk about what's happening in Sri Lanka or in Bangladesh or in Nepal and their respective development experiences. So what RIS is trying to do here is to make a very, very small, very modest beginning. I invited ICSSR and UGC for their blessings and they connect with the process. Because eventually, if universities have to engage with think tanks, as so many tables mentioned, credit issue comes in. Credit for students, for assistants professor when they are going further up. So unless you incentivize that process, the traction would not come. So systemic support for creating those points where tractions can come in, that's our idea. It may start on a very small basis, but let's make a beginning. Let's see where it goes. Commodore Vasan said that it is already happening. I'm so glad that it is happening. It may be happening in the Chinese studies in India, but we have to see this in a larger perspective to see the development experiences and how they're getting theorized. Chairman Dr. Mohan Kumar has to make some points and then he has to go, so I would request him to take the floor.
Thank you, Sachin. I think that's a lot of food for thought. And as someone who can claim that he is involved with both, at least for now, I wouldn't like to give a response to you now. Let me put it in my pipe and smoke it. I'm not very sure where I will come out, but it's good to have an open mind. I do believe there is a huge difference, at least in the audience that I address, as the way I address many of you in the past 2 days and then my students. I think there is a difference. There's an age difference, there's a knowledge difference, and there is even a difference in the approach. But I think we could have this debate some other time. I just wanted to beg your leave because I really have to go. But before I go, Mr. Patwardhan has asked me to convey the following to you, and I convey this with some trepidation because I wanted to ask him what he meant by some things, but he pushed off. So I will try to tell you what he told me, and then we will be in touch with UGC. No, the UGC is in the middle of a huge churn, as I understand it. That's what I was chatting up with him. I think it's a good thing. And he was telling me some things which I even hesitate telling you in the mic, because there is so many things which are happening in the education system. So anyway, 4 things. One, the UGC supports policy centers in universities. He said, please announce that. I'm hoping it is financial support and not just and not just support. But that's the key question that I wanted to ask before he got the hell out. So, but I think he meant that. I really think he did. So the second thing is internships. And he said we are okay with internships of students, and universities can find places where the students can get intern. Again, I'm hoping the UGC will either give some credit or some financial credit, but anyway. The third is on the issue of co-guides. I did not fully understand. It came from table.
Where probably earlier you were not allowed to have co-guides.
Okay.
Now they will allow you to have co-guides.
Wonderful. I knew there are smarter people in front of me, and I knew they would interpret what I'm going to say. So thank you very much. And finally, he said, yes, we will also support the establishment of more think tanks. So this is what he conveyed to me, and he was really keen, because, he seems like a very, very committed person, Sachin. And he said, I'm happy to kind of have this conversation later, but I have done my job of conveying to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Professor Mohanty, I go back on that table. So, thank you.
So, over 1 hour, I was listening to the august audience. So many ideas it has come up. Now, if you look at universities and think tank, you find that think tanks are overburdened with many pressing issues, very contemporary issues, and where immediate policy action is very much required. And for that, most of the institutions are very specific and specialized in certain areas. As compared to research institutes, universities are more broad-based, dealing with several issues, and students are trained in different areas. So when it is a question of connecting university with the think tanks, we often feel that there is a gap in terms of absorbing students from the universities to get into a specific institute, for which they need at least 6 to 1 year time to train them. And therefore, it has been our endeavor to interact with many universities within the country and outside. Now we are connecting ourselves with BIMSTEC countries, just to see that how they can very well connected with the think tanks. So we try to give them empirical ways of some short-term training, some academic discussion, and how to connect the theory with the policy-making process. We try to build that kind of system. And that has really helped in terms of doing that gap that we used to feel some time back is now it has come down drastically, and that's a good sign. In RS, we started with the summer school for the students who pursued their MPhil PhD in international trade. So we found that after such training, they have not only tried to minimize their tenure in terms of completion of their PhD, but they themselves became very equipped in terms of associating with many think tanks. So that has been the case with RIS and many other think tanks. Now we see in the different parts of the country having similar kind of programs. I think with that kind of program, we think that the connect between universities and think can really go up in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mohanty. I was seeing one hand. Yeah, please. Yeah, there, yeah.
Thank you, Professor Chaturvedi. This conclave is so infectious that I'm compelled to invent two more. Just to tell you that the last available model syllabus, model curriculum in UGC website dates to 2011. Now, the question is each and every institution will have to revise the syllabus once in 3 years through the Board of Studies. At this point, since the ICSSR member secretary is here, it's my humble submission that the think tanks, in collaboration with UGC and ICSSR, can give an empaneled list of resource persons who can be invited by the universities during the time of Board of Studies which could be partially sponsored by ICSSR, which is an actionable input. Second thing is that whenever there is in the question of updating of model syllabus for social sciences discipline, ICSSR can take the initiative of uploading the template, and concurrently it can be updated, which will be where you can simply say that you just follow this. Despite the fact that the university has certain autonomous, you can say, fix something for your regional autonomy. For example, if it is, I'm from Pondicherry University.
Yes.
If it is Pondicherry University, reserve something for Look-East policy, for maritime trade, or what is happening in Coco Island, because we have a campus in Andaman's Islands as well. So these are the things that ICSSR can take lead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kumarasan. I see Commodore Vasan here and Professor Paswan, and then we would close. Professor Milindo would present the summary and then the final response from Professor Malhotra. So, Commodore Vasan.